다음으로는 글로벌 밸류 체인의 재편에 관해서 이야기를 나눠보겠습니다. 코로나 이전에도 글로벌 밸류 체인의 재편에 대한 변화는 지속되었지만 코로나 이후 그 변화가 급속화되었습니다. 특히 한 국가에 편향되어 있는 생산 기지는 어떤 위기관리 시스템에 있어서 큰 문제점을 노출하였습니다. 이와 같은 현상에 있어서 여태까지의 기존 전략망과 새로운 전략이 요구되고 있는데 이에 대해서 이사님의 의견을 듣고 싶습니다.
Yes, well, as you said, Dr. Che, I think a lot of the issues that we've seen become urgent in the last few months are not fundamentally new issues. We've seen the evolution of these value chains and supply chains for quite some time. But I think COVID-19 has been the kind of shock that has really changed priorities for a lot of companies and government policymakers. So for years, I think, in reality, it was costs that drove supply chain decisions by companies. And companies have always been aware that there are, certain risks involved with supply chains. And, companies have talked for years about supply chain resilience. And they've, been aware of potential political and regulatory risks. But I think they've never been the real driver of strategy and decisions. So I think those concerns have started to move up the priority list for companies, and priorities have just flipped round now, and we are seeing a lot of changes happen. And the tariffs in the US-China trade war started some of those adjustments as an almost immediate necessary response for some companies to adjust to tariffs. But they were also starting to think much more seriously about geopolitical risks to their presence globally and the balance of their supply chain, their value chains. I think COVID-19 has just taken that to another level. And maybe this is a kind of era shift. I'm not sure if it's, it might be a little too soon or too dramatic to say that, we're going to see a complete reversal of the trend of the last, 10, 20 years in this direction, because the fundamental logic for, globalized business and production and supply chains hasn't gone away. Those cost differences, the access to markets, all those issues that drove these adjustments, they're not going to disappear overnight. But I think we will see this shift in priorities. So I think the important thing is that when companies are thinking about these changes, they're not only thinking about how do we adjust to this week's US-China tariffs, how do we adjust to an immediate coronavirus problem, or a specific country that is an issue for them, but they're thinking in much broader terms about the resilience of their supply chains, whether that's in relation to political risks or pandemic or natural disaster or whatever, and just readjusting those priorities so that cost isn't necessarily always the only driver, and having a bit of a more balanced and broad approach to planning a strategy going forward. But yeah, I think we won't see a return to the world exactly as it was before the US-China trade war and before coronavirus.
말씀하신 것처럼 리쇼링을 포함한 기업의 국제적 입지 결정에는 복합적인 요인들이 다양하게 관련될 텐데 한국 정부는 이번 코로나 이후에 리쇼링 정책을 적극적으로 추진하겠다고 하였습니다. 그렇지만 이미 한국 정부는 지난 15년 전부터 기업의 리쇼링 정책을 추진해 왔는데 아직까지 가시적인 성과가 없습니다. 이에 대해서 어떤 조언을 좀 해주실 수 있을까요?
Well, I think the main thing that has changed with the idea of reshoring is actually quite narrowly focused on the medical supply chain. So I'm not sure how far and how long we will see the political support and pressure for reshoring more broadly going, because I think in the US, where maybe we have the strongest political pressure for this, even there, it's not clear to me that companies are necessarily going to go along with some of these policies without very strong combinations of incentives or disincentives, carrots and sticks. And it's a pretty big challenge for governments if they really want to drive those changes. Maybe they can do it in certain areas, certain products, when it's related to the medical industry. In the US, obviously, there's a big push to do that in areas related to national security. I think the political pressure for this is not as strong in Korea. And I think governments here have tended to understand that you can't overcome the logic of the market just with some policies, and companies, if they want to survive, are going to have to do what makes sense for them. So I think we'll see a lot of action in these narrow areas, but more broadly, I think for the US and China, it's one thing with a very large domestic market. It's very difficult to see how you could have a much broader fundamental trend of reshoring in most other countries, where so much of their success, particularly for Korea, economically in recent decades, has been tied to a globalized economy. So I think we'll see some success in very narrow priority areas, but it's difficult for me to foresee a wider trend of reshoring, kind of reshaping Korea's economy more fundamentally.
말씀하신 것처럼 한국 기업이 선택할 수 있는 리쇼링 정책이 그렇게 많지 않습니다. 그렇다면 지금 심화되고 있는 미중 간의 갈등 중에 한국 기업이 선택할 수 있는 전략적 방법으로 생산 기지의 분산을 제언하는 사람도 있습니다. 이에 대해서 어떻게 생각하십니까? 실제로 중국에 있던 생산 기지를 중국과 FTA를 체결한 인근 아시아 국가로 이전하는 것도 제한되고 있고, 또한 이렇게 니어쇼링을 포함한 포괄적인 리쇼링이 한국에 더 맞다고 제언하고 있는데, 이에 대한 이사님의 의견을 듣고 싶습니다.
But I think it's a very logical approach to look for those options, and I think we're seeing a lot of countries look for those. A lot of companies look for those countries that have that advantage, places where they have that good access to China. I think that is part of the solution for a lot of companies. But again, it's not a kind of an easy fix to all these problems. So I think that status and an FTA status or other factors in terms of market access and some of the costs involved is an important consideration. But of course, as you know, it's not the only consideration. So I think of course, companies, the whole point of diversification is not to be focusing too much on any individual country. So people are not looking for an alternative to China. In most cases, they're looking for several, or an addition to China. And I think that's the right approach. And also, I think companies still have to look at a lot of issues when they're choosing a country. That country might have a lot of its own domestic risks. There's a reason China has been such a popular destination for foreign investment for so long. Their domestic infrastructure, their relatively stable environment for foreign business, etc. So we've had a lot of clients over the years that have moved to other locations for cost reasons or because of problems in one place, and then found a whole new set of problems in another location. So I think companies are always looking at a very broad range of risks and the pros and cons of each country and where they fit into a more diversified map, if you like. So I think we're going to see some countries that become sort of the new favorites. But I think it's, again, important to look long-term and not just what country makes sense short-term from one perspective, but to really keep that broad approach to assessing the risks and the advantages of each market.
마지막으로 그렇다면 여태까지 기업들이 리쇼어링에 대해서 보다 복합적인 관점으로 접근하는 데 반해서 한국 정부의 리쇼어링 지원 정책은 보다 좀 단일한 목적으로 진행되고 있다고 보여지고 있습니다. 그렇다면 한국 정부의 성공적인 리쇼어링 정책을 위해서 마지막으로 제언을 한마디 해주신다면 어떤 말씀을 해주실 수 있을까요?
Well, I think like in every country, it's a little bit of a simplistic answer, but I think governments have to be realistic about what they are asking companies to do, because companies' strategies will play out over years beyond the term and the time frame of any one government administration. So for any strategic change to succeed, I think it can't just be from short-term policy pressure. It has to be, I think, from understanding what is actually aligned with companies' interests. I think if companies are, forced to make changes, they will simply undo those changes as soon as they can, or they will move very slowly or not be very cooperative. I think really understanding what will make relocation or reshoring in certain areas viable and realistic and sustainable for companies is the only way to get their cooperation long term and make sure that they're able to still be competitive. I think Korea has some advantage in this because compared to many countries, they're more advanced in this process and thinking about these issues because, as we discussed earlier, Korea has been caught in the middle of geopolitical pressures and competition in many sectors for a long time. So Korean companies have already experienced having to adjust to relocation into and out of China, diversification, competition from Japan, competition from China coming up at the other end. So I think at least Korea is further ahead in this process, I think, than a lot of other countries where the political debate on these issues is new and where a lot of companies have not been dealing with this. I think in Korea, mainly for cost and competition reasons, companies have a lot of experience of figuring out these changes and are actually able to work with the government to help them understand what policies can be sustainable and realistic for that reshoring process.
네, 비용과 효율성 측면에서 이제 리스크 관리라는 측면으로 글로벌 밸류 체인의 리쇼어링 정책에 대해서 이야기 나눠보았습니다. 현상에 매몰될 것이 아니라 장기적이고 지속 가능한 정책이 필요하다는 정부 제언에 대해서도 한 방향을 제시해 주셨습니다. 이제는 광활한 내수를 가지고 있지 않은 우리나라에서 적합한 리쇼어링 정책이 무엇일지에 대해서 보다 구체적이고 밀착감 있는 정책이 요구되는 시점이라고 봅니다. 네, 코로나19로 미중 간 신뢰관계가 역대 최저 수준을 기록하고 있고 미중 간 경제 갈등이 반복되고 있는 상황 속에 산업, 기술, 군사 분야에서 양국 간의 패권 다툼이 가열화되고 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 글로벌 위기 속에서 생산 기제의 다원화 정책이 추구되고 있습니다. 이와 같은 상황은 디지털 변혁의 시대에 온라인의 언택트와 오프라인의 컨택트가 협치점을 찾아가듯이 정책과 기업에서의 협치점이 요구되고 있는 시기입니다. 변화된 무역 환경에서 오는 불확실성을 통제하면서 새로이 등장하는 긍정적인 기회를 활용하자는 관점에서 짧아지고 넓어지는 글로벌 밸류 체인의 재편에 대해서도 논의해 보았습니다. 네, 오늘 좋은 말씀 주신 컨트롤 리스크스의 앤드류 길홈 수석이사께 다시 한번 감사드립니다. 감사합니다.